Today we're starting the Santorini Passive House, and this is an incredible project. 6,000 square feet that we're gonna make into a beautiful passive house. But this house has a lot of problems, and we found even more problems when we did the deconstruction. We are finding rot everywhere. In fact, a big portion of the house has been structurally undermined by the mold and the rot and the damage that it caused. So let's go figure out why we have all of this rot in this house and figure out how we can make sure that we never have that rot again. So one of the things that we noticed today when we came on site is coming into the garage, we have a couple real gems waiting for us. And I've been doing this for 22 years and I've not very often seen water damage this bad. This is unbelievable. So not only do we have major sections of 3/4 inch plywood that have rotted out so badly that the people doing the demolition fell through the roof that was on the outside of the house as a exterior patio that had tile over it because the water damage was so bad. In fact, the floor joists are so damaged that they are literally failing themselves. What caused this major, basically failing of the waterproofing systems on this house and on this exterior deck? Well, let's go look and find out. And this is the culprit. We have bitumen or an asphalt waterproofing over this deck. And this asphalt waterproofing depends on the solvents that are in the asphalt when it's first made to remain flexible. So very often you see old asphalt roads that are what are called alligator, meaning they've broken up into little sections. And we see that all through this waterproofing layer here. Is the solvents have essentially evaporated over time and left this material dry and brittle. And that dry and brittleness has allowed water to get in past the asphalt and into the plywood before. That is why we have all of that rot and that mold underneath it. That's why those floor joists have literally rotted out and they are no longer functional. We're actually lucky that this level of mold is over the garage and not on the inside of the house, but that's actually next. Pretty much every house we go into, when we're doing the demolition, we see exactly this. But we often don't see it at this extent. So first of all, we have a door, and that door is surrounded by wood, and that wood is surrounded in mold. And that mold is from the roof up above, and that roof is actually a deck. And that water has come into this section of the house for so long that we literally have mold on top of mold. It has destroyed the entire structural integrity of this deck, of the floor joists above us, and of the wall behind us. The door has been pinned open because this header and this post right here are so rotted out, they've started to collapse. Anytime I could expect this glass to break because it's not supposed to be under compression. But this isn't the only mold we found in this house. We're about 8 feet away from the rot that we see at this door. And I see that right now I have what's called a moment frame. So it's a big steel beam, and that steel beam supports the exterior wall above me. So this is deck and this is house. And what we have right here is we have a duct, and that duct is coming up and putting air right at the base of this wall right here. But here's the crazy thing, is this duct right here is drooping down, and I didn't know why it was drooping down. So I hit it with a stick. It's got water in it. So imagine this was your house. Imagine you were running your heating and cooling system through a pond of mucky, disgusting water for potentially years. You were exposing your kids to mold for years. This is a disaster. This is the culprit of all that water damage down below. Right there in the corner, we see massive rot. And that's all because this waterproofing membrane, which is essentially a tar, has gotten dry and failed over time. We see not only that we have all this rot below, but we see right here that we really have no barrier for water from this deck to go into the house. Literally, there is no waterproofing stopping water from going inside the house to outside the house. And that's why our register on the inside is filled with water. Before we came, there was all the water collecting on the very outside of the roof because the water leaks had caused this structural damage, which changed this roof. This is how we build really bad construction, and this is why we're changing this entire house. In a lot of houses, we see a lot of rot. And most of the time, that rot is associated with window and door openings, and a lot of times with door thresholds. And that's because the waterproofing around the perimeter of the house is largely a impermeable membrane, and it's very hard for water, if it's done correctly, to get into the house. Window and door openings are the exception to that. That's where that waterproofing starts or stops, and we have that flashing around the windows, and often that is not done correctly. But there's no window or door openings here. This is in the middle of a wall, and for the life of me, I can't figure out why we would have a leak, a massive leak that probably went on for years, has caused a tremendous amount of mold damage and rot damage to this section. It's gotten so bad that the amount of water that came in here rotted away the waterproofing paper that used to be on the outside of this wall. It's rotted away the studs that used to be here. This has happened for years and years and years. Let's go on the roof and see what caused this. As we saw below, we had a lot of water damage, but it wasn't in a typical spot that we see water damage. Corners, inside corners, corners of the roofs, or penetrations. And what we see here is something we don't see very often, which is basically a hole in the wall going into an exterior gutter. So this whole assembly is fraught with danger. First of all, as you can see, there's a ton of debris in that gutter, which means that all of these trees are dropping this debris, clogging that drain. That drain is going to fill up, and then the water is going to build up. Now you also see that none of the membrane that is part of that roof membrane is carried into the drain. So when that roof water fills up, it starts going around that membrane and straight into the house. That is what's causing all that damage on the inside. And this is a detail that is super easy to make sure that we don't put into our projects. We put drains that have filters that block that area of the drain from getting clogged with debris. And then we put an overflow drain so that if this drain gets clogged, we have water coming out on a different part of the roof. Now you'll notice we have two different holes here. The first hole is the main drain, and that goes into the gutters that go into the space around the basement. The second hole is actually an emergency drain. So if this hole gets blocked, that second hole starts leaking water out, making sure that we don't get a lot of water collected on this roof. What happens is when that water comes out of that second drain, it actually goes outside so the homeowner can see it, knowing that they have a clogged drain, so they can come up here and fix it and clear that drain and make sure their roof lasts forever. So as you can see, we have a big uphill on the uphill side of this house, and then we have all of this water in a rain event that's going to be collected in this big funnel, and it's going to funnel all right towards the house. This mat right here actually blocks the velocity of a lot of that water and catches the debris. But this wasn't here when we first started this project. We put this here to stop the erosion from this hill. So what ended up happening was we had water coming down the hillside, flowing into this gutter. Now this gutter has a little bit of a hill right here, so any water that had velocity would come up and fill up. But there's also a ton of debris in this. So it's going to form a dam essentially, and it's going to fill with water. And that water will fill up to the point where it gets over the rim of this gutter right here, and it's going to go against the foundation. Now, what's the real problem with this? Well, firstly, we have no waterproofing against the foundation of this house. In fact, somebody at some point found out that they were getting water inside the house and came here and put caulking at the top of the gutter. Caulking is not waterproofing. Caulking is a temporary fix. This is not going to last. Getting beaten by the sun, getting hammered by the elements, getting debris rolled up against it. This is not the way to waterproof this. So this entire assembly of this wall is wrought with danger. We have water coming down a hillside. We should slope that and catch the water way far away from the house and drain it away from the house. We should have waterproofing against this concrete wall, and then we should have something that allows that water, if it does hit this wall, to go away from this house, not right up against the foundation where it's going to eventually find its way in. This is a really bad detail, and this is very common. So we're standing at the top of the retaining wall, and this retaining wall protects this entire side of the house from water from uphill, but it also holds back a lot of dirt. And that dirt gets heavier and heavier the wetter it gets. So it's really important for us to remove water as quickly as possible. So this hillside catches all this water. That water comes down into this gutter. Now we want this gutter to go downhill and drain out to the street or to a site collection area. We don't want it to sit on top of this wall. But what ends up happening is if it's not maintained, this gutter fills with dirt like it is here, and it stops the flow of water. Then we have big cracks like you see here that are going to catch that water, and instead of directing that water away from the retaining wall, it's going to direct that water down onto the face of the retaining wall. They did do some work here, and they took this waterproofing material right here, and it's essentially a screen. But what they didn't do was they didn't bring it above the gutter. So any water that comes in and flows into this gutter flows right behind this little screen right here. That's one of the reasons we see this retaining wall cracking, is because it's got a ton of water and a ton of earth on it. And the designers of this did not do a good job of laying this out. This membrane should have come up over the top of the concrete gutter, so that any water that hit it would get directed back. And then we should protect that screen with metal flashing that will keep the sun from damaging that screen. That assembly would have lasted forever. Instead, we have a cracked foundation concrete retaining wall. We have cracked gutters. We have gutters filled with debris, and we have water now destroying this retaining wall. This whole retaining wall is going to end up having to come out. Flat roofs are really hard to get right. And a lot of times, a lot of the water damage we see is from flat roofs not being done right. Now, we have a flat roof with a membrane, which is a really good start. And they've done some really good things. So if you notice around the perimeter of the roof, they've taken that membrane and carried it up the wall. And they've left space between the top of the membrane and the bottom of that wood siding. That's really good, because we see that we've collected debris around the perimeter of that roof. And when that debris causes that water to go up, we see that we've protected the wood or the bottom of the siding from damage. Now, we still see some damage on the bottom of that because rain bounces and it causes drops, and it's gonna soak into the end grain of that wood siding. So it's really not a great detail. We could have put a piece of flashing across the bottom of that wood and protected it even more. But the biggest thing for me is that we've gotten flashing around all of the skylights and all of the other penetrations in this roof. That's really good practices. But some of them, like the fireplace penetration and some of the roof penetrations, don't have flashing. That membrane is going flush with those materials, causing them to be really good focal points of leaks. And lastly, we see a lot of debris on this roof. There's debris collecting at all of the entrance points. And you see, it's not just at the gutter or the place where the water leaves the roof, it's actually way far up against the house. And what's happened in the past is we've gotten dams from the debris at the gutters and the scuppers, and it's caused the water to basically go up in level. So now we've got what's called ponding, and that ponding leaves that debris on the roof. So you can see the ponding on this roof was 20 feet away from the scupper or the drain of that roof. That's really bad. Not only does ponding water cause leaks more frequently, but ponding water weighs a lot. It puts a lot of load on top of the roof where there wasn't intended to be ponding and roof load. So this very well could lead to a roof collapse. We want to make sure that doesn't happen by putting overflow drains on our flat roofs, by making sure that we're cleaning the debris off of that roof, and making sure that ponding doesn't happen in the future. So now we're in the back retaining wall area, this patio that's uphill of the house and below the retaining wall. Gravity is always going to cause that water to go downhill. So we want to make sure that the lowest parts of the area that's collecting that water are as far away from the house as possible. That's not what they did here. They put the drain for this entire patio 12 inches away from the foundation, and it is the cause of a lot of water damage below. We can already see that they've ripped up the tile in this area and tried to waterproof that area around that drain to keep water from going against the foundation, where they again don't have any waterproofing. And what it did was it just went underneath that drain and underneath that waterproofing and went against the wall of the house, rotted out all of the wood, and it's adding surcharge. So it's adding water to the load against the retaining wall that's actually part of the house. Now, it's not only the drain that's failed and the drain that's put in the wrong position, it's the fact that we have this giant basin that we're catching water in, but it is not waterproof. So first of all, it's not built very well, and there's not a lot of rebar. And I can tell that even though I can't look through concrete, because I have a giant crack right here that's displaced, meaning the concrete has fallen in one part of the house and risen in the other part of the house. So any water that comes here is going to hit that crack, go underneath that crack, underneath the concrete and against the wall of the house, causing that area, especially in the Bay Area where we have highly expansive soils, to get wet and expand, exacerbating the crack, exacerbating the water migration, and exacerbating the load that goes against this wall. What should have happened in this space is they should have put a drain out here. They should have sloped all of the concrete away from the house. So no matter where the water fell, it was going away from the house. In this big patio area, they did everything wrong. The exterior of our houses have to be detailed correctly to make sure that water can never get in past the siding and into the wall behind. This intercom is not an exterior intercom, it's an interior intercom, and it doesn't even have any waterproofing on top. So any water that hits this wall is going to come down this wall, through these channels, and right into this box. Secondly, we have a grill here that is freely open to the water. And lastly, we have literally a plastic construction that has water that can get right into here and into the electronics of this whole assembly. And lastly, we see that we have a box with no flashing around it at all. There's nothing to direct water away from this. I can literally stick my finger in this box into the wall of the house, meaning that water can at any time get into this box and straight into the house, causing a tremendous amount of water damage. We need to make sure that every time we penetrate the exterior of our house, we're making sure that water is diverted away from any openings, and that on the inside, we're sealing it to make sure that if water does get past here, it gets directed out and away from the house. So throughout this video, we've talked about how to keep water out of the house. But what happens if the water is already getting into the house because you didn't build it right, or you bought a house that wasn't built correctly? Well, this client has already had a water problem with this house. And in fact, you see this entire wall behind me is painted with this red material. This red material is called red guard, and it's intended to stop water migration through a concrete wall or through a material. We use it for underneath tile on showers, and here they've tried to use it to stop water from coming into the house. This is not the right usage of red guard or any waterproofing material, because once the water is in the concrete, it's going to come out. And here's the other problem, is this wall is not a continuous concrete wall. It's a cinder block wall. And in between every block, we have a crack. Those cracks are gonna let water through here. That red guard's not gonna stop that. This is not a good solution. We have to stop water before it gets into our house, which means we need to pay attention to how we waterproof the windows, the doors, and the roofs, and how we manage water outside the house so it doesn't come into the house. What's not known is that 25% of people have a gene mutation in a gene called HLA. And that gene mutation means that any mold exposure can cause them to be sick for years. So even when they move out of that house or out of that building with a mold problem, their symptoms don't stop. That is an unaccepted consequence of not doing things correctly. If you're interested in learning more about mold or mildew problems, or just building better science, please hit subscribe as we show you how to build a better way.